They flew me to Washington to sign off on a $6.5 billion defense contract. By noon, the paperwork was done, the handshakes were photographed, and the future of my company was supposed to be secure. By 5 p.m., I was replaced in the hotel lobby by people who thought titles mattered more than foundations. They didn't realize I was the only one who could activate the system they had just sold. No sabotage. No threats. No dramatic shutdown. Just silence. And a $6.5 billion project frozen exactly where it stood. My name is Samantha Cole. I'm 39 years old. Until yesterday, I was the chief infrastructure architect at Falstaff Defense Systems. Right now, I'm sitting in my home office in Raleigh, North Carolina, watching my former employer's stock price slide downward while my phone fills with messages they never thought they'd need to send me. Let me be clear. I didn't break anything. I didn't steal anything. I simply walked away with something they couldn't replace, because they never understood it in the first place. 10 years earlier, Falstaff Defense Systems didn't exist. Back then, we were a 40-person startup crammed into a renovated textile mill, surviving on bad coffee and better ideas. We weren't chasing billion-dollar defense contracts. We were trying to solve one stubborn problem. How do you build encryption that doesn't collapse the moment power concentrates in the wrong hands? I joined after leaving a comfortable role at a major tech firm. The pay cut was painful. The hours were worse. But the idea was worth it. My background was cryptography and large-scale system architecture, but my real contribution was philosophical. I believed security should never depend on one person, one server, or one executive. Control creates fragility. Distribution creates resilience. At the time, it sounded abstract. In hindsight, it was a warning. 3 years in, we cracked something big. I designed a quantum-resistant encryption framework that distributed validation across independent nodes without slowing real-time communication. It didn't rely on trust in a single authority. It relied on structure. I called it the Keystone Protocol, because like an arch, it only worked when every part supported the whole. The military noticed. The first contracts were small. Isolated systems. Limited deployments. Every success led to another. I built a team of engineers who understood that we weren't just writing code. We were designing trust itself. 5 years ago, the Department of Defense came back with a question that changed everything. Could we scale Keystone across their entire command network? Pentagon. Field operations. Global deployments. That conversation became Project Keystone. From day one, I insisted on one rule. No single entity could activate, modify, or override the system alone. Not the government. Not the company. Not even me. Multiple independent validations were mandatory. The DoD pushed back. It slowed deployment. It complicated oversight. I showed them the simulations. I showed them the failure scenarios. Centralized control failed every time. Eventually, they agreed. What I didn't advertise was the final safeguard I built into the foundation. If the validation chain was altered without proper authorization, the system wouldn't crash. It wouldn't alert anyone. It would simply stop accepting new initialization requests. Quietly. Gradually. Like a locked door that never announces it's closed. That wasn't sabotage. That was integrity. Everything changed the day we were acquired. Overnight, our startup became Falstaff Defense Systems, named after the private equity firm that bought us. The language changed first. Vision became leverage. Security became efficiency. 6 months later, our founder was moved into an honorary role, and Amanda Krell arrived as CEO. Her resume was impressive, but her experience lived in spreadsheets, not systems. Then came Chase Donnelly as CTO. Consumer software. Fast iterations. Minimal friction. In our first meeting, he called Keystone over-engineered. He said the military wanted simplicity. I told him friction was the point. He smiled like I'd missed something obvious. Over the next year and a half, the company shifted. Engineers who questioned decisions were reassigned or quietly let go. Documentation was shortened. Validation discussions were postponed. Chase kept circling back to the same idea. Streamline the protocol. Centralize approvals. Make it easier to manage. I blocked every attempt, reminding them the DoD approved Keystone specifically because of its distributed design. They tolerated me because they needed me. Project Keystone was heading toward full deployment. $6.5 billion doesn't move without familiar names attached. 3 weeks before the signing, the reorganization memo arrived. My team was split into separate units. My role was redefined as strategic oversight. Budget reviews followed. Research initiatives were cut. Then documentation control shifted to Chase. They were shrinking my authority without touching my title. Still, they needed me in Washington. The Department of Defense expected their architect. So I boarded the plane. The night before the signing, Amanda called a meeting in her hotel suite. Board members. Legal. Chase. She spoke about transformation. About the future. Then she said the words I was waiting for. After the signing, my role would transition to senior technical advisor. Chase would take over as chief system architect. No vote. No discussion. I asked what would happen if I disagreed. Amanda reminded me the board had already decided. They assumed I'd swallow it. They didn't understand the difference between authority and access. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Calm. Professional. We arrived at the Pentagon on schedule. Inside the conference room waited General Catherine Ward and her cyber operations team. She greeted me by name. She spoke about Keystone's architecture. About distributed validation. About why it mattered. I felt Amanda tense beside me. Chase introduced himself as the new implementation lead. Catherine frowned. The documentation didn't match his words. Amanda tried to smooth it over. Catherine shut it down. Validation authority remained mine. Any change required formal review. The room went cold. They had moved too fast. Missed a step. When Catherine asked if I supported the organizational change, I answered honestly. I couldn't support anything that undermined the system's foundation. The contract was signed anyway. Cameras flashed. Hands shook. On paper, everything looked fine. On the flight home, no one spoke to me. When we landed, I declined the company car. That night, I wrote my resignation letter. Clear. Professional. Final. I sent it at 7 a.m. the next morning. By noon, my phone was exploding. I didn't answer. 3 days later, the system began to respond exactly as it was designed to. And that's when they finally realized what they had lost. 3 days after I resigned, the first alerts appeared inside Falstaff's internal dashboards. At first, they were easy to dismiss. A handful of new initialization requests failed to authenticate. Chase called it a deployment hiccup, the kind that happens when a system scales too fast. Engineers were told to rerun scripts, restart services, document anomalies, and move on. But the pattern didn't move on. It repeated. Quietly. Predictably. The same requests failed again, then others like them. No crashes. No alarms. Just refusals. The system wasn't broken. It was refusing to proceed. That's when Alex called me from a personal number. His voice was low, careful, the way engineers speak when they know something is very wrong. "It's happening," he said. "Exactly how you said it would." I asked him what changes Chase had pushed through after I left. Alex didn't hesitate. They removed 2 distributed validation steps and attempted to consolidate authority under a single implementation pipeline. The moment he said it, I knew. The integrity layer had detected an unauthorized alteration of the trust chain. The system wasn't punishing them. It was protecting itself. Inside Falstaff, panic started spreading. Chase blamed the engineers. Amanda blamed timelines. Meetings stacked on top of meetings. The Department of Defense was expecting the first live activation window within days. Instead, initialization attempts quietly stalled. Existing connections began to degrade. Latency increased. Handshakes failed. The system behaved like a locked engine with a full tank of fuel. Everything present. Nothing moving. By the end of that week, Alex resigned. So did Priya. Then Elias. The only people left who truly understood Keystone's architecture were the ones leadership had spent 2 years sidelining. I didn't ask them to leave. I didn't have to. They understood what was coming. A week later, we were sitting around a borrowed conference table in downtown Raleigh, sketching out the beginnings of something new. We called it Reintegrity Networks. The name wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. While we were filing paperwork and setting up our first servers, Amanda emailed me. The tone was different now. Polite. Careful. She asked if I'd consider consulting. $500 an hour. I didn't respond. 3 days later, the number jumped. $10,000 an hour. Guaranteed minimum. Potential return to my former role. Expanded authority. Urgency threaded through every sentence. I still didn't respond. This wasn't about compensation. It was about principle. They wanted the lock to open without restoring the foundation it protected. Then the phone rang. General Catherine Ward. She didn't waste time. Falstaff was reporting technical complications. The DoD was losing confidence. I told her the truth. Not everything. Just enough. Keystone was operating as designed. Distributed systems resist centralized takeover. Integrity isn't a switch you flip. It's a structure you respect. There was a long silence on the line. Then she asked me about my new company. Within 48 hours, we received a formal request. A pilot project. Limited scope. 90 days. $3 million. Proof that distributed trust wasn't just a philosophy. It was a solution. While we worked, Falstaff unraveled. Their stock slid as analysts started asking why a fully funded defense project wasn't moving. Amanda was removed as CEO. Chase followed days later. An interim leadership team promised a comprehensive review. It didn't matter. The damage wasn't managerial. It was architectural. 2 weeks after that, the Department of Defense suspended Project Keystone. A week later, they terminated it entirely. $6.5 billion vanished with a press release that cited failure to meet technical specifications. The same morning, the DoD announced a new multi-year contract with Reintegrity Networks. Smaller. Focused. Built correctly from the ground up. Harrison Falstaff called me himself. He offered apologies. Then authority. Then the CEO position. Full control. Written guarantees. I listened. I understood the scale of what he was offering. Then I declined. You can't rebuild integrity by stapling it onto a structure that already collapsed. 2 days later, Falstaff stock dropped another 15%. Trading halted. When it resumed, more than half the company's value was gone. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Good engineers lost jobs. Careers stalled. None of that felt like victory. But the lesson mattered. Security isn't something you optimize for speed. It's something you design for restraint. Over the next year, reintegrity networks grew. Carefully. We hired people who understood why friction exists. Our systems expanded beyond defense. Power grids. Hospitals. Financial infrastructure. Everywhere centralized control had become a quiet liability, distributed trust offered a better answer. A year later, Falstaff Defense Systems was acquired for a fraction of its former valuation. Project Keystone was archived. Taught now in business schools as a case study in what happens when leadership mistakes authority for understanding. Harrison and I met one last time over dinner. He asked if I ever sabotaged the system. I told him the truth. I didn't need to. The system remembered who built it. They flew me to Washington to sign a $6.5 billion contract. Then they tried to replace me in a lobby. No drama. No revenge. Just silence. And a project that refused to move forward without the integrity it was built on. Security isn't about who holds the title. It's about who understands the cost of centralized power. They forgot that. And the foundation didn't. If this story made you think, let me know in the comments. If you believe integrity still matters in leadership and technology, hit like. And if you want more real-world stories about power, systems, and the quiet consequences of bad decisions, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.